I think we should start with pay tribute to the lads from 16 Air Assault Brigade, who at the moment are risking their lives in the name of saving people down in Kabul, as well as the British Special Forces who are there doing the same thing. As all the tensions and turmoils we may have in London, I can promise you they're having a harder time of it. So all
What
credit to
what
them. 16 Air Assault being led by Brigadier Dan Blanchard, and it's not an easy command he's got. So all credit to them and all good luck to them and Godspeed to them while they're down there.
How long were you in Afghanistan, Sven? And how many tours did you do there?
I did several tours, yeah. So I was up in Mazar Sharif originally with something called psychological operations. I was also out there in Kabul, Kandahar, south of Kandahar as a civilian consultant as well. So yeah, I've done a fair bit of time over there.
And I really want to know your analysis of how we've actually got here, because was are you against the principle of the US and the UK coming out of Afghanistan? Many people have said, look, but by now it was actually just it was almost a very, very low risk peacekeeping mission. So therefore, it really wasn't worth, especially when you look at the low number of casualties, us or the US pulling out at this point. Others, of course, those who look at perhaps the political brownie points that Biden or Trump might have got from pulling out, are saying no, this would have been a never-ending war. So was there logic to the US and the UK pulling out or not?
Well, first of all, I completely agree with what Tony Blair has said today in his long article. I'm not sure if you've read it, but it's on the website.
Imbecilic is what he's called
Well,
by.
what he said, to be specific, because I think it's being slightly misreported by other media channels this morning, actually, which is what he said was committing to the sort of the term forever war that was part of the election campaign is imbecilic. I'm not sure he's actually said that Biden himself is imbecilic, and I think it is worth being clear about that. But Blair is absolutely right. I mean, tactically and most importantly, strategically, this is a complete and utter calamity. I mean, the idea that regionally this is a solution by pulling out is a farce. The idea that strategically, on a geopolitical sense, a geostrategic sense, that it doesn't play straight into the hands of Iran, Russia, China, Pakistan, and various other malevolent forces of different degrees. Of course it does. I mean, what this presents is the idea that we'll commit to you in the short term, but not really in the long term. If we give you our word, you can only have it for a few years. And who is going to commit to work with the West if that's the reality? It's not even a supposition anymore. It's just simply the reality, which is we'll stay with you for a bit. We'll make you commit as civilians to Western values, Western principles at fear of death, at risk of death. And then just when you're fully committed, we'll walk away and leave you to the wolves. It is totally immoral. It is completely cack-handed. And I'm so angry, I can't begin to express my anger. I mean, I have here my medal from Afghanistan that was given for my service. You know, on the back of it, it says "In service of peace
Can you
and
see it?
freedom."
Can you hold it up to the camera?
No, yeah, that's the Afghan medal. I'm not sure if you can see it there, but on the back of that says "In service of peace and freedom." It makes a mockery of this. I will certainly never wear this. That's for sure. And I used to obviously wear it for Remembrance Sunday and so forth. The death, the blood that was cost by friends and service people around me in the name of those words that has now been thrown away by our politicians and obviously specifically by Biden for his political short-term agenda, not the actual world strategic agenda, is so disgusting. It is so vile, morally and strategically and politically and so forth. It's very hard to put into words what to think at this point, other than a complete and utter lack of confidence in our political system. It makes me wonder, why are we listening to these people? Why are we giving them the time of day? Why is our media really almost interested in broadcasting what they have to say? Because what they have to say at the moment is excuse for mass murder. What is going to happen now in Afghanistan is mass murder of women, of people that it's already happening in Kandahar and south of Kandahar. They are door-to-door searches going on to find people who are working with ISAF and in various forms, who are women who are involved in different parts of society.
How did you feel this week, Sven, when we saw General Sir Nicholas Carter? I'm not sure if you saw him doing some of the interviews, but he was describing, it was one particularly with Kay Burley on Sky, where he was essentially saying, oh, look, we need to wait and see, and perhaps the Taliban won't be so bad when it comes to women's rights. We need to sort of almost give them the benefit of the doubt. And I was absolutely staggered by those comments, but many people online said, well, look, he was there, perhaps he knows what he's talking about more. What did you make of those comments?
Okay, it's certainly not my position to comment on General Sir Nick Carter. I mean, I've met General Carter. He's been exceptionally good to me over the years in terms of my dealings with him, so I'm not here to criticize him. I can certainly personally vouch for the fact that you can negotiate and you can believe in dialogue over division with the Taliban. I have personally engaged with Taliban and resolved tactical issues on the ground with them on a daily basis in Afghanistan when I was there, which saved lives and resolved situations tactically. In terms of strategically, unless you put strong sanctions in place, I mean, the February 2020 commitments have not been lived up to that were arranged between the American government and the Taliban. Obviously, there should be sanctions if they don't live up to those agreements. And what's clearly happening is they're not living up to the agreements. I mean, almost now it's come to the point, it's irrelevant what General Sir Nick Carter says, or anyone else for that matter from the West now, because this has now gone into the sphere of influence of China and Russia and Iran. We're as good as finished. We have no relevance anymore in Afghanistan. It doesn't matter if we do a contact group with the G7, doesn't matter if it's the UN, doesn't matter. This has gone straight into the hands of Russia and China, just like Syria, just like we bungled Syria with Assad, just like we bungled Libya, just like we've bungled many of the different things that we've done as the West in recent decades. The flattery that we're paying ourselves to China, I say, well, we'll invite Russia in and deal through them, and they can negotiate this and they can help with this. They're not going to help us with this. They're going to take it over, just like they've done with Syria, and they'll use it as leverage to turn around and say, exactly, you can never trust them. They're in for the short term. What they're interested in is some Democrat who wants to win the next election, nothing to do with the Afghan people, and that is nothing short of criminal. I mean, the women that well, I said this on a radio show.
Let's come back and talk about that. We'll take a quick moment to collect ourselves, and let's come back and talk about what you've got to say about that. This is, of course, Talk Radio. You're listening to Cristo. Sven Hughes joining me, author, political strategist. He served in Afghanistan. He knows what he's talking about here. As you can tell in his voice, he's absolutely furious at what's been going on over there. And we'll talk more to him in just a moment here on Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB, and on the Talk Radio app. Talk Radio. This is Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB+, and on your smart speaker.
Weekend Breakfast
with Cristo
on Talk Radio.
Morning, it's Cristo here on Talk Radio. We're reviewing, well, the events of the last few days in Afghanistan, talking about the front pages today, where apparently Tony Blair is describing Joe Biden, or of course the actions, or indeed this commitment to calling this a forever war in Afghanistan, imbecilic. And many of the front pages are saying this. It seems that many of you are agreeing with this morning. And of course, it does lead us to the question about whether the UK-US special relationship is well, not really worth the paper that it's written on. Do join the conversation here on Weekend Breakfast, 0344 499 1000. Sven Hughes served multiple tours in Afghanistan. He's an author, political strategist, and of course knows what he's talking about when it comes to that region. Still joins me here on Talk Radio. He's been looking through the newspapers, but we've barely touched on them because we're still talking about your experiences and opinions on this. And I mean, you're absolutely furious, aren't you?
I think let's go back to the newspapers. I mean, I think the newspapers speak volumes. I mean, pretty much every single front page is saying, you know, imbecilic retreat. That's the Sunday Telegraph, that's the Sunday Times. We should all hang our heads in shame, was the Guardian. Yes, I think the Observer's got Afghans face catastrophe without urgent aid. UN warns. The Mirror, Blair, Biden, imbecile on Afghanistan. This is the West. This is our entire infrastructure, our democratic process that puts these people in power to make intelligence-led, effects-based strategic decisions on our behalf. We pay their wages to do that. We have a selection process to get them into that power, which is called the voting system and so forth. And this is what they've done with it. Between Biden,
why do you think?
Because of short-term political ambition. I mean,
but bearing in mind what a disaster this is, who is advising Joe Biden? There's got to be something more going on here as to why he's still pressing ahead in such a fashion, because he's not seen the disaster and said, right, well, we'll put the brakes on a little bit.
I think no. Biden has been very clear since he was, a senator, that he does not believe in our involvement in Afghanistan. He is, I think, on record as saying, I'm not going to keep us fighting a war just for women's rights and so forth. I think perhaps his son served, didn't he? And therefore he was saying, I don't want to send my son back in the name of women's rights in Afghanistan. I don't think that's a justifiable reason. Who is advising him and whether or not the intelligence-led side of things is sufficient is certainly a valid question. But I don't think, and I mean, it's remarkable for me to be saying this, who the hell am I to turn around and say the president of America doesn't understand the geostrategic consequences of this? But it really looks as though he doesn't understand the geostrategic consequences of this.
Well, you served there, and you probably, if anyone's in a position to make that comment, you are.
Well, no, I mean, look, I say it humbly, and I genuinely say it humbly, but I am staggered. I mean, you're talking, this is the next Bay of Pigs. I mean, I know he can stand there and grandstand, and maybe it'll go down well in America, saying, look, there'll be no more body bags in the short term from Afghanistan. But it's, oh, yes, but there are body bags. They're just not yours, mate. There's a vast amount of body bags right now. They're just not yours. Now, the imperative, therefore, if you believe in not necessarily the world's policeman, but if you believe in right and wrong, if you believe in the idea that Western powers who have militaries can intervene and should intervene in the name of humanity, in the name of what is right, in the name of long-term peace, if you believe in that, then this is the time to step up. And I completely endorse what Blair's saying in his long article, and I really advise people to go and read it for themselves.
But there are some people, Sven, and I got some texts and tweets about this yesterday morning, saying that actually, obviously what we're seeing is terrible. Obviously, no one is enjoying what's happening in Afghanistan, but actually, maybe we shouldn't be trying to impose what some see as Western values on Afghanistan. Maybe this was always going to be doomed from the start, because who are we to impose these very values you've just discussed on? No,
that's fine, and that's totally valid. That's an entirely valid position to turn around and say we shouldn't impose Western values on people. It's also entirely valid, and they're not mutually exclusive, though, to turn around and say we should defend the notion of basic freedoms. And when radical Islam, as it was, not just Islam, but radical Islam took over the country from 1994 with the Taliban, and then with the influx of Al-Qaeda and ISIS and so forth, that is absolutely not right, not appropriate, and someone has to intervene to stop that. Those things are not mutually exclusive. It was the harboring point and the launch pad for 9/11 and other attacks. The Taliban were given the opportunity to serve up al-Qaeda to avoid war. They didn't. Pakistan was financing it and so forth. Someone had to step in and sort that out. That's perfectly legitimate and reasonable if we want the world to continue without mass murder in the name of radical Islam. That's appropriate. I completely see it as valid, though, to say it's not appropriate to impose Western values and try and make everyone eat from McDonald's. That's not appropriate either. But that's not what was happening in Afghanistan. If you were down in Kandahar and so forth, it was absolutely not that. What it was doing is saying there should be parity of education between men and women. I mean, that's not imposing Western values. That's called just common decency of thought in a world in which we respect women, because we do. And it's not right for someone to turn around and say, well, we don't, so that's the end of it. Well, then you're wrong. I mean, simply, you're wrong. And if you have to be told that and shown that, then so be it. But what we've done is promise that betterment and then take it away. And not just that, we've left the door open now for ISIS, because don't forget, ISIS and the Taliban are not the same thing. Al-Qaeda and the Taliban are not the same thing.
What is the difference between them?
They're both Sunni extremists and believing in Sharia law, and they both tend to turn to violence to achieve that. However, ISIS is almost the more hard line. It's a lot of Taliban were defecting into ISIS because of the lack of achievement that the Taliban were having on the battlefield. It's the extreme. ISIS wanted to expand out of Syria and Iraq and almost take over Afghanistan from the slightly more moderate Taliban, would you believe it? So they're at each other's throats. So there's all sorts of complications in Afghanistan regionally, Pashtuns and so forth, which now is not the time to get into that. But suffice to say, we've left it in a worse place than we found it now. And what we've created is an incubator of terrible, a terrible incubator of violence that will export, and it will be financed by our enemies, and it will be exported onto our shores.
We'll get